Lisa. Wednesday night, you have the lounge with Desiree and Anissa. Thursday night, you have Rockin' 80s Invasion with Lisa. And I'll be back on Friday night with Freaks in the Basement. You're listening to The Jam with Ike Dog.
I had to put the jam on there. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna run through it again. The week schedule the weekly schedule. But that was an awesome commercial there, Chris. Thank you for doing that. I don't know if it's up to date because I didn't get a chance to listen to it. I was trying to hurry real quick, but I was trying to get something done. But I hope it's pretty close. But I'll go over it again real quick before we go. It's been a pretty awesome podcast tonight. We're so close to the. That's a lot of comments tonight for sports. So last week, my co-host I had a guest co-host, Rob. He's one of our regulars. He helps co-host on the lounge with D. Marie Love and Anissa. And he asked me the question, who is my second favorite Bronco? And I said, well, I have two favorite players on offense, two favorite players on defense, and I'll give you those real quick. So my second favorite Bronco of all time, I think he would be a Hall of Famer. I think he would have been the best running back. He would have been probably the best running back beside him, and TD would probably be in the top together. Bobby Humphrey, if everybody remembers him, he only played like 2 seasons. He had some off-the-field problems. Great running back. I got to meet him a couple times. I didn't really know him very well, but I got to meet him 1 or 2 times. And I know a lot of my family members know him. One of my family members knows him really good. But if I don't, like with football, if these guys don't stay out of trouble, they lose millions of dollars. It's crazy. That's another podcast to talk about. I'll tell you that. Because there's so many players that just went down the wrong path, and it's hard to see that. But shout out to Bobby Humphrey. Hopefully he's doing well. I don't know. I have to look into his bio and see what he's doing now. So hopefully he turned things around. But he was a great player while he was here in Denver. And I remember him running a 90-yard touchdown. He had a 93-yard touchdown one game, and I was like, wow, this guy's the real deal. And so, Rob, if you get a chance to listen, make sure that you let me know and leave a comment. But Bobby Humphrey, my second favorite player of the Denver Broncos. And then defensively, my top, well, everybody knows John Elway's he's the GOAT. I think he's the best quarterback that ever played the game, the game of football. Hey, Chris, who do you think the best quarter, and Denise, since you guys are in with me, who do you think the best quarterback is, whoever played the game of football? I know you guys are not real big into football, but who do you guys think the best quarterback is that ever played the game, in your opinion? And to anybody else out there, inbox me, put it in the live chat. Let me know. Thanks for getting me. That's a lot. I never get that many comments on sports. Thanks, Chris. We're building up the comment section, guys. So whenever you join the IKE DIAZ Sports Show, make sure you join our comment section. So it's pretty fun. We're getting a lot of comments. Dan Marino, last week on the show with Rob, I told him that Dan Marino's in my top 5 of all time. He didn't win a Super Bowl, but look at the thing. He retired as the number 1 passing quarterback. See, we had a big debate last week, me and Rob, between John Elway and Joe Montana, and I think that John Elway was never in the league of Joe Montana was never in John Elway's league because of the things that, Joe Montana had great teams around him. Elway never really had a great team around him, and that was my key to my debate last week on the sports podcast. We had a fun podcast last week, me and Rob. And my key debate was my side of it was that John Elway never had a great team, and he did more than Joe Montana. Joe Montana finished with like 29,000 yards. John Elway finished with 48,000 yards. So John Elway almost doubled what he did, and then You know, John Elway, as a player, went to 5 Super Bowls, and as a GM, he's already went to 2 Super Bowls. So John Elway's done some pretty big things, you know, and all the playoffs wins. So it's pretty. I know Joe Montana has a few more Super Bowl wins than John Elway, but it's okay. It's okay. We'll have to get into that. We'll have to get into that debate again with the Joe Montana thing. But you are right about the. I do like your pick on. I do like the pick on. Yeah, Montana. A lot. Those guys all came back. The hardest time to play in NFL history was the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I respect any quarterback or any player that played in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was a brutal game, and then you had all these guys, you know, when the 70s started, you had all these 300-pound men coming in the game. You know, but pre-70s, you didn't have all these 300-pounders. So that's why, and these 300-pounders that were moving like 200-pounders, like 185-pound guys, they were moving faster than them. So the 70s, 80s, and 90s were the toughest time in NFL history, and we'll never see that again. I mean, they're even better now, but they just can't play the game the way they did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was a rough sport back then. It was to play the game of football in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You had to be a tough person. So, and like I said, the 60s, they just didn't have the talent or the size. So that's why I said, but the 60s, I would really love to see that style of football. I'd really get it. You know, I'd really like to see. I've never really got to see a lot of those games. There's not a lot of film on it, but I really like to do some research and find some of the films. So, my 2 favorite defensive players of all time is, of course, Steve Atwater and Dennis Smith. So Steve Atwater and Dennis Smith. And if a lot of people don't remember who Dennis Smith is, everybody knows Ronnie Lott, who played with Joe Montana for the 49ers at safety, played the same position as Steve Atwater at safety for the Denver Broncos. So Dennis Smith played at USC in college, and he played with Ronnie Lott. So Ronnie Lott and Dennis Smith played together at USC, and then Dennis Smith played with Steve Atwater for the Broncos. So Dennis Smith got to play with 2 of the greatest safeties of all time. Ronnie Lott's, you know, probably the best safety of all time. And then Steve Atwater is probably the second best. So it was fun to watch these guys. These guys were these 3 guys that I'm mentioning, Ronnie Lott, Dennis Smith, and Steve Atwater, is one of the reasons I say the 70s, 80s, and 90s was the hardest era to play football in. Because these guys were coming to knock people out there. That I don't like to use the word headhunters because it's kind of rude, it's kind of ugly and mean, but that's what the name of the game was back then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now it's a whole different game now. You can't play like that anymore. Yeah, Joe Theismann was a good quarterback. I got to meet him one time at Mile High Stadium, and he's only 6 foot, but he looks taller in person than. He's only like 5'11" or 6 foot, but he looks taller in person, to be honest with you. He looks like he's about 6'2" when you meet him in person. I remember meeting him when I was like about 17 years old, I think, at Mile High Stadium. It was pretty cool to meet Joe Theismann. I know, that was a vicious... I know, it did end. It's Lawrence Taylor coming around the end. That was a scary... That's Chris. You're making my point. Like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, these guys were athletes. These guys were big. These guys were strong, and these guys were violent. I mean, now we have athletes. They're strong. They're fast, but they can't play the same way they did back then. All those hits, like John Elway took a couple thousands of hits. Joe Montana took thousands of hits. Joe Theismann took thousands of hits. These quarterbacks now, they take a couple hundred hits. They don't take the hits that they did 70s, 80s, and 90s. They used to get hit. Even if the ball was gone, they were still getting hit and knocked out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So it's pretty crazy. It's, like I said, it's another debate. That's a thing we can go into on a 30 for 30 too. One of those TV shows. I think they should make something about that, about the athleticism and the play back then. So real quick, this is my last segment of the show. I'm going to give you my score. I'm going to tell you why, and then I'm going to rerun the weekly schedule for everybody so everybody knows what's going on throughout the week. So you have the New England Patriots who come to Mile High City this Sunday, and I got the Broncos winning 14-10. The Broncos are down, or the New England Patriots are down Rob Gronkowski, and they're down Edelman. So they don't have their two top receivers. And if you remember last year in the AFC Championship, New England came here and lost 20-18. And they had got Rob Gronkowski back, and they had all their receiving core. They had all their top dogs, and they still lost. And I think Tom Brady's only won 2 times in his life here out of 10. I think he's 8-2. I think he's 8-2 in Colorado. So 14-10. I see New England coming down. I see Brady throwing for 1 touchdown, and the New England Patriots probably getting a field goal. And I see the Broncos scoring 1 on defense, and hopefully, Trevor Siemian could get the ball into the end zone. He can get one of his receivers into the end zone. That's my hope, that he gets him into the end zone. So real quick before I go on do the weekly schedule, Chris or Denise, since you're in with me right now, and I know Robert, I think you're still on. Excuse me. I was just burping. I'm drinking my Dr. Pepper, guys. I'm telling you, I got to get Dr. Pepper to be our sponsor because I promote them every week. But anyway, did you guys see the hit from the Tennessee player on Chris Harrison this week? It was an illegal hit to his knees. And if so, what'd you think about that? I talked about it earlier in the podcast, and it was a dirty play. It turned out it started a fight and everything. It started a fight between the Broncos and the Tennessee Titans, and it was pretty ugly. I just looked at the play again, and it was pretty ugly. So I like. That's why I say the 70s, 80s, the thug play. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was thug play. I didn't want to say it rudely. But Talib backing up his brother, his teammate, it's pretty fun to know that he got back up like that. But he don't want to get his team in any bad predicament or any bad situations by getting in those fights. So I hope Talib. I've been mad at Talib for a long time because he does so many things, so many penalties, and I get upset with him. But yesterday it showed me a lot, but I don't want to see any kind of fighting or nothing, thug play. I don't want to see any kind of thug play. And they should have, in all honesty, both of them should have been thrown out the game. Talib should. I'm a Bronco fan, but Talib should have been thrown out the game. He played the whole game, so I think that he should have been thrown out the game. But the player that did that, number 83 for the Tennessee Titans, I think that he should have been thrown out on that play. He shouldn't even been in the game any longer after doing that. There's no room for that. You can't end somebody's career, or because those are career-ending injuries when that happens. Or it's like to come back from like that. If they even do, it's a 1 to 2 year injury to come back from. So we don't want to see it in the sport, guys. It's uncalled for. So even if you're a youth football player and you're listening to my podcast right now, go out there play good, play fair. The way I always see it, above the hip and below the neck. if you're gonna hit as hard as you can. Hit them as hard as you can. I've been coaching for a long time, and it's okay. You can hit them as hard as you can as long as it's fair. That's the way I see it. Above the waist, below the neck. That's the way I see it. I don't like hitting them